So, some of you are not really going to know what I'm talking about tonight, but I'm talking about Kung Fu Retreat, and I freaking love Kung Fu Retreat. I went on it last weekend, and Robin was there, Catherine was there, nobody else who's here tonight was there, but Anne and Henri also came, and Henri went. Henri, for those of you guys who don't know him yet, he's a white sash. He's only been here for a couple of months, and he flew to Michigan to do Kung Fu Retreat, and he loved it. He loved it more than anybody else there, I think. It's the best weekend of the year. I've gone, I believe this was my 15th year. And I'll tell you, I don't go for the food, although the food was pretty good this year. It's a little bit better than last year. I go for the company. I love being around students from our school and from the school in Michigan, the schools in Michigan. There were 70 of us there this year, and we first of all, we fly out there, and the flight is rough because we do the red eye, and last year there was somebody poking me in the back of the head and like trying to start all kinds of stuff with me. This year we sat in the back row. Robin and I were on the same flight, and we're making sure none of that happens. So back row, no reclining seats, rough flight. But got there, took a nap, and then drive up to Gaylord, Michigan. It's out in the middle of nowhere. There is nothing there except Kung Fu Retreat. I think we are like 90% of the economy in Gaylord. And it is Friday night. Everyone's kind of like nervous and excited, even people like me who've been on it many, many times, because we're like, what are we going to do this year? What's it going to be like? There's a theme sometimes, and we're like, who's here? You know, who's going to be doing what kind of stuff and the demonstrations and all this. So we're kind of nervous, and then we just get into it. We start practicing in the first drill, and all that stuff disappears because you're just practicing. And we do it in chunks of time, between an hour and a half and 2 hours usually, that we're practicing straight. And you'd think after doing that for the entire weekend, you get really tired, and you do. But while you're in it, it's magic. It's like nothing else exists. It's like your body doesn't exist. Your mind is sharp-ish, focused on what you're doing. And it's just, it is an experience of, somebody was saying, I think Sifu Brown was quoting somebody else, but like there's no cell phone connection up there. There's no Wi-Fi. So you're completely unconnected to the net, but you're experiencing a connection like you hardly experience in anything else. And so we're experiencing this connection with the other students. We're experiencing this connection to our practice, to our own minds and bodies. And for many of us who don't spend a lot of time in nature, it's a connection to nature, and we're like out in the trees punching and kicking them, and it's like just the most fun thing ever. So Friday night we did this sweet flow drill. It was really incredible, and I don't think anybody really appreciated it. But it was this back and forth with a stick, and one partner attacks the other one with a stick, and there's a takeaway, and then this other attack, and it's like back and forth, and it's so fluid. It's like if you've ever watched the Tai Chi partner form, if you had a stick and you were going very fast. And it was so fun and just amazing to watch Sifu Brown teach that drill and come up with it, the sequence. We sit and meditate and we talk, and then we eat a lot of food until about midnight and go to bed, wake up the next morning. We had a late retreat this year. It was only 9 o'clock that we started. So late, and I loved it. And I said thank you from everybody from LA, because this is much, much nicer than the 8 o'clock start time or earlier that we normally do, because it's 5 o'clock for us. And then it's Kihon. We go to the basketball court, and it's like Sifu Brown's version of Enter the Dragon, where there's just like thousands of people in lines, like practicing basic techniques. We only had 70 people, but it's kind of like that. And we're just making noise, and then he did this different twist on it this year, where we did some basics on the basketball court, and then he had us running up the hill, throwing basics as we're moving up the hill, and then running back down and then doing the same thing. And some people really almost died, I think. But it was great. And so we get to the end of that. He made a comment, I think it was like 15 minutes into it. And he said, you're 15 minutes into the day, and everyone was already starting to get tired. You could tell. People were breathing heavy and like kind of hunched over. But you keep going, because the energy around retreat is incredible. It's like nothing else. And so even though your body gets physically tired, you don't really feel it until you stop and you sit down and you're like, oh my God, that was a rough drill. And then you're eating breakfast, and then the next drill we go down to the beach and we're throwing each other on the beach and kicking sand up all over the place. And you can see, if you're close enough, that I took a piece of retreat with me in my toenails. I do this every year, not on purpose, but you can tell who went on retreat because their toenails are just filled with what is sand in Michigan, which is basically a mixture of sand and dirt, and it's just like it's pretty much there until next year. It like just finally washes out, and then I get back in the sand. I loved the drill that we did on the beach. I got to practice with Henri and a lot of the other students at the other school, and we're pretty close. The beach is not huge. It's not like the beach here. It's like a small private beach around a lake, and there are a lot of us. So we could be throwing each other onto the partners right next to us, but that causes you to be so focused, so in the moment. And if you ever notice this, like, have you ever been in a car accident? You're driving down the street, and Sifu Brown, when he says this, he says you hit a patch of ice, but I know you guys don't hit patches of ice around here, so somebody rides their bike in front of you, and you slam on the brake, and you turn, and you feel yourself, and you see you're going into the phone pole. You know what's going to happen. And time slows down, and it's like you're so single-pointedly focused. Your mind is like a laser, and there's nothing else that exists for you. That's Mushin. That's no mind. We're so focused on what we're doing that everything else ceases to exist for us. And that's the state of consciousness that we're trying to get in our physical practice as well as in our meditation. But when you're like throwing your partners next to each other, and you know if you're not careful, someone gets hurt, you pay attention. You know if you're not paying attention, you're going to get hurt. You pay attention. And so this is one of the beautiful things about our practice, is that it affords us this opportunity that we don't get in everyday life. You don't get in a car accident in everyday life unless you're a terrible driver. I'm sure there's some people out there. None of you guys. You're very mindful. But when you practice, well, you're not actually in danger because you know the rules and you know how to be in the dojo and whatever drill you're doing. You know that if your concentration lapses for a second, that it could get very dangerous very quickly. Even Tai Chi, partner form, but even just doing Tai Chi, if you mess up, you could end up tipping over. You could end up tweaking something. So it's funny because we voluntarily put ourselves in that situation. And we know that we could, if we're really not paying attention, we could get hurt. And that is what causes us to be so focused. And that's what causes us to reach these higher states of concentration and these deeper states of consciousness. So that's really what I think of when we're on the beach and we're throwing each other. It's like you could have just gotten hurt, but we were both paying so much attention that it never happens. Nobody ever gets hurt in practice because of that kind of awareness. It's beautiful. And so after that, we go up and we get lunch, and then we go back down. What was next? Focus mitts in the field. And I was asking these guys what their favorite part, and they said focus mitts in the field. I said, we do focus mitts all the time, but we don't do like a 20-step focus mitt combination, non-stop for 2 hours. And that was actually the part that killed me the most on retreat. And you think, what do you mean, Steve? Well, you hit focus mitts all the time, you got great technique. Yeah, I hit focus mitts for 2 hours like my life depended on it. I was hitting so hard, my hand would kind of like turn into a claw at the end of it. And I actually feel it in my forearms more than anywhere else. And it's really interesting. This is the lesson that I took from this drill. You can do a drill in class, and let's say you're in beginner class, and maybe you're a beginner student or you're an advanced student, but you're treating it like, this is beginner class, so we're being all nice and nice, and we're doing it with a beginner attitude. You can take the same exact drill. You can change nothing about it. Don't change the techniques, don't change the instructions, don't change anything. But you do that drill in the advanced class, all of a sudden you're kind of a little bit more intense with it. You're throwing stuff harder, you're moving faster, and there's like no nonsense. You're not worried about helping out your partner in a way that's like, I'm trying to talk to them. You're helping out your partner by just being there, completely conscious and with them. And I think it was the hardest that I've ever really hit focus mitts for an extended period of time, and that was the first time that I ever really felt probably the way that a lot of you guys feel after hitting the focus mitts. Like, they kind of hurt, because I was hitting it hard as hell. And there were a few times where if I didn't have a really tight fist and a really straight wrist, as hard as I was hitting, I probably would have hurt myself. But that's one of the things that you learn in practice. That is why in a beginner class, as a beginner, you're going a little slower, because you're learning how to punch correctly. But by the time you are just great at the technique, then you have to up the intensity of your practice to be appropriate to the level of your technique. And that's something that I think sometimes we get a little bit lazy on. We decide, this is just the way that I do this drill. This is the way that I've always done it. I did it the first night that I was here, and I still do it the same way. No, you got to grow with your technique and with your skill in the intensity and the way that you practice. It's the same thing in meditation, really. I think we have a tendency to meditate the same way as we did when we first started out. And for some of us, that's I meditate for 10 minutes a day, and it's really nice. I've been doing it for 6 years. Yeah, I'd meditate for 10 minutes a day. After 10 minutes is really comfortable, you should be doing it for 15 or 20 minutes. After 15 or 20 minutes is really comfortable, you should be doing it for a half an hour or more. And a lot of it is we get used to the amount of noise in our minds when we meditate. And we're just used to, this is my experience of meditation. I sit and there's a lot of noise and a lot of thoughts, and I'm okay with it. It's just what I do. But you should, as you get better at meditation, you should be able to catch those thoughts more quickly, and you should be able to let them go more easily and more quickly. So the point is, now I'm spending more time just focusing on the breath and less time just trying to recognize and battling away the thoughts. Your experience of meditation should get deeper as you practice, because you're sitting for longer, but also because your mind is just more focused. So be really aware of this. Be very aware of how often we let ourselves slide and just do things the same way that we are used to doing them in practice and in life, because we do it all over the place. And then dinner, my favorite meal besides lunch and breakfast, because I'm just so tired and hungry at that point. And every time I go to eat, I pack it in. I mean, I eat 2 or 3 plates and whatever I can get. And then I'm also eating bananas and granola bars in between. But going into the last drill, I'm feeling nice and fed. And the last one, we usually do a demonstration. It's like family night in the dojo. Everyone sits together and cheers for everybody, and it's sweet, the stuff that people do. The first thing that we usually do is flying kicks, which Sifu Brown always makes me do, even though I'm getting old. My flying kicks aren't as high as they used to be. The kicks aren't that high, Sifu. But we go, and it's awesome. Lately, the mats that we use have gotten super. Some of you guys remember from our Kung Fu retreat, the mats get wet, and they are trying to do flying kicks, wearing shoes on, or wearing socks on ice. It's so slippery. And so that is really the most mindful I had to be all weekend, to not dump myself on my head. It was just jumping and landing on slippery mats. And then this year, because it was so cold that night, the coldest I think it's ever been on retreat, we were moving in between. So we did some weapons defense against a knife, and then we did a demonstration. So Sifu Brown described it as you're watching the movie, and the movie is this weapons defense, and then the commercial is this. Somebody's going to do this break. Someone's going to practice this form or do whatever. And I love watching students. And every year I'll see somebody, at least 1 or 2 people new, who I don't really know because I haven't been there practicing regularly for so long. There are people come up who I don't, I've seen them for the first time on retreat sometimes, and they're demonstrating something. And it's incredible how much progress people make from one year to the next when they're practicing intensely with this kind of discipline and this kind of focus. And I saw a few people demonstrating forms and demonstrating breaks. Robin had an awesome break, 2 pieces of wood with a sick, sharp elbow right through. She killed it. You a little bit nervous about that? Yeah, a little bit nervous. and you think you were nervous, there was like a 14-year-old girl next to you. She did the break. And that was like so amazing to see the physicality of the practice. We can make our bodies do things that pretty much no one else on the planet can do. As martial artists, and especially of martial artists with like a certain degree of focus and discipline. And the biggest break of the night was Mr. Kratz. Mr. Kratz was a student of mine in the second school in Michigan, and he's in the military now. He's trained to be, I believe, an Army Ranger. And he is like in it, and he is for real. He comes back. It's been a little bit since I've seen him, but he's like jacked now. And he was actually getting that way from practice before he left, and now he's like super jacked. But they stacked up 10 pieces of concrete. And let me tell you, if you hold one piece of concrete, you're thinking to yourself, nobody can break this thing. This is a piece of concrete, and it's solid. And then I'm like, I've done a stack before, and I'm stacking them up, and I'm thinking, no, this is crazy. And then they stacked up 10 pieces for him. And it's like this high on him, and he's doing a palm strike, downward deliver to break it. And I don't know how many pieces he's broken before, but let me tell you, as somebody who has done breaking before, when you get up in front of that stack, and I'm sure this is similar to your experience, Robin, you don't think to yourself, oh, this is going to be easy, I'm going to do this. You think to yourself, what the hell am I getting myself into right now? This is insane. They better have 911 on speed dial because someone's about to get broken here, and it's going to be me. And so, but I think Mr. Kratz has, a great perspective, and he was probably as calm as any human being could be looking at a stack of 10 pieces of concrete. And he wound up for that palm strike, and he started like right about here, and it broke 8 pieces, and then it stopped. And it reminded me of the first time I did a break of concrete. I was trying to break, actually the second time, I was trying to break 3 pieces of concrete with a knife hand, which is really hard, especially when your knife hand is not that hard. And I was visualizing all day long because Sifu told me, you're going to break 2 pieces of concrete tonight with a knife hand. And so I was visualizing. I see myself lined up in 2 pieces of concrete. I break the concrete, and the crowd goes, oh. It's the best moment of everyone's life. And so then they stack them up, and Sifu Brown says, this was like 10 years ago, Sifu Brown says, that's not a big enough stack. Put a third one on there. And so sure enough, the power of my mind is just ultimate. So I've been visualizing 2 pieces all day long, and so I break exactly 2 pieces. And then, so Mr. Kratz, I think Sifu had told him, you're going to break 8 pieces, or at least is the conversation that we had. Yeah, he said earlier at some point, you're going to break 8 pieces. And so he broke 8 pieces. And to see 8 pieces of concrete just go like that, it's not just force. It's great technique, because you can have a lot of force, and you can have enough force to break 8 pieces of concrete, but you can't be able to use your arm after that unless you have great technique. So he was totally fine, and then he broke his last 2 pieces. What, did he use a knife hand to break his last 2 pieces? Something. Yeah. Something tough. What was it? A knife hand, yeah, like I said. So just amazing demonstration to see people do weapons forms and all kinds of beautiful stuff. And then that's the end of Saturday night. Everyone goes to bed even later that night because we're all so pumped up from the demo. And then wake up Sunday morning. We do one of my favorite parts of the weekend. We're out on the beach, and we do some Tai Chi, which is the part that I led. And then Sifu Brown came out, and we did a audio Qigong, this vocal energy work. And it was almost like chanting Om. It was like this. We were sending this energy and this noise across the lake, and it was so cool because we made this initial blast, and you hear it kind of come back, and then you hear like a second. It was like and then like a And I don't even know the physics of how it worked, but it was so cool that we could make that happen. And you know that everybody in their little cabins around the lake were like up in the morning thinking like, what is this? We're being attacked by terrorists right now? Like, this is scary as hell. And that's part of our goal up there, is to scare as many people as we can when we're on retreat. And then the last part of Sunday was grappling. We rolled out the mats again and we practiced a really nice grappling flow. And Sifu said a few words, I said a few words, and that was it. But it's the opportunity to immerse yourself in practice for an extended period of time is so rewarding and so beneficial, and it puts you in a state that you just can't get when you practice like for a day, for an hour or two at best, and then you come back to it a few days later. And that's just the way that life works. Like, we can't all live martial arts like me. Most of us have to come in and then go home into your real world and deal with whatever you deal with, and then come back and you're like, oh, thank God I'm here. I don't have to deal with any of that stuff now. We want to try to take this kind of calmness and this energy and this attitude that we have towards our practice out into day-to-day life. And I personally love using retreat as like a yearly charge my batteries, and I'm good for the next year. Now that we have our Kung Fu retreat, it's 6 months that I have to last. It's way easier. But meditation is the same. If you don't meditate often, if you're only meditating like once or twice a week, you are not going to have nearly the same impact as if you meditate every day. If you meditate for 5 minutes, you're not going to have nearly the same impact as you will have for 10, 20, 30 minutes. And part of it is just when you immerse yourself in this state, it becomes more of a natural part of who you are. It becomes a natural state for you to achieve more at will. And Sifu Brown loves this analogy, and it's one of my favorites. I think you take like a glass of pond water, and I think of, whenever he says this, I think of the lake at retreat, because the lake is nasty. And you like scoop this up, and it's got all this stuff swimming around in it. You set it on the table, you see like there's little, I swear I've had like little red worms on my legs after jumping in the water at retreat, but there's like all this stuff swimming around. And then you let it sit there and it just settles to the bottom. And then you look through the glass of water and it's crystal clear. Well, that happens with time and with consistency of meditation. Same kind of consciousness that you'll get with like really setting aside a chunk of time for practice. You got to do it with meditation. So if you're starting to recognize like I'm having a hard time getting to that state, I'm having a hard time getting calm and peaceful when I sit, just sit for longer. That's it. If I can handle sitting for 10 minutes, it's not that bad. Like, I'm not freaking out, sit for 15 minutes. I can do that, sit for 20 minutes. And some of you are already thinking like, oh, Steve, I don't have 20 minutes in the day. I mean, I know you do. You hear it all the time. Look, you think I'm sitting here meditating all day long? You're sadly mistaken, and I wish you weren't. But you find 20 minutes, 30 minutes in your day and just sit. And it will change your life. You do it for 6 months, you will never stop. That's all I did. I did it for 6 months, and I was so much more calm and peaceful but focused and happy that I just knew, this is it. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I don't care what happens. I could get run over by a truck and my legs are crushed. I might never practice Kung Fu again, but I'll meditate. Literally, like, I think sometimes I fantasize about getting trapped on a deserted island so that there is nothing to do except eat coconuts and meditate. I would love it. Not that I would miss all of you guys for sure. But just to sit. I mean, that's it. So this is what we're going to do right now. We're going to have a slightly abbreviated meditation tonight, but it's going to be a power meditation. So when you sit like nothing else in the world exists except your breath. You are on a deserted island, and you have nothing to do. You have nowhere to go. You're trapped, and that's a wonderful thing, because for right now, all there is to do is breathe. Nothing exists. Sit.